of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Rev Don. Welcome, and we will have a lovely day today. I hope that wherever you are, you're having a beautiful Friday. And as you know, if you follow Midday with Rev Don, whatever platform you may be watching, you can type your questions and or comments on that platform, and they will appear here in my chat room, and we can talk directly, which is probably my favorite thing about this particular broadcast. I've been doing it for a while now, and previously I've done podcasting, which is purely audio. I've done the vlogs, which was purely video. And on those podcasts, for the most part, people had to call in to interact, and the vlogs that they had to write separately of the broadcast. So to be able to just communicate with you this easily during the broadcast is a great pleasure and something new for me. There was a running joke when I was living in Florida about my favorite meal being something different. But that does kind of describe a lot of my attitude in life. I like things that are new and different. Hello to Renee in the chat room. Good to see you. And I like the newness and difference of this platform. And I look forward to that day when we can interact more easily all through video on this platform. And I enjoy that, for example, as the platform through Zoom for my Monday night chats at Patreon. And as you may know, I have a Patreon at revdonlewis.com. And every Monday night we have a video chat where any of the patrons can attend, and we have lovely conversations where we can all interact in video at the same time. There's also a monthly newsletter. There's a monthly seminar. This month's seminar will be on oracular work and mediumship. And the seminars are for all those patrons who belong at the seminar tier or above, or if you are not currently a patron or not at that level, you can buy a ticket if you particularly want a specific seminar for $25, which you can find at corellianpublishing.com. So you have that attendance option as well. And this month, again, will be oracular work and mediumship, something I've done for many years, and a fascinating subject that I have a lot to say about. So we'll be talking about how and why it works, how to do it, things to be aware of, and no doubt some personal stories as well. Also and that will be July 22nd at, I want to say 1 p.m. Central, 2 p.m. Eastern. And then on July 15th, I am doing a special Patreon parlor, which is an evening with the Corellian ancestors, which is only for my Patreon members, and all Patreon members are welcome. I had toyed with the idea of offering tickets for that as well, but I've decided to keep it strictly for my patrons. But it's easy to become a patron, and there are a number of membership levels that are not difficult to attain. So if you're interested, again, revdonlewis.com. And the evening with the Corellian ancestors will be stories and channeling, only for my patrons, and a few invited guests from the High Corel family. And perhaps some others. We'll see who all ends up, but people who will contribute to the evening. And I am having a lot of fun with Patreon, and still working on oh so very many things. And I have to say, one of my favorite things, again, is this broadcast. I quite enjoy spending this time with you, and I hope you're enjoying spending it with me. Tomorrow is the 35th anniversary of the Crystal Web. One of the things we've been doing is offering the Crystal Web Kit, which includes this booklet that tells you how to establish a Crystal Web access point, and also comes with 2 crystals, one to bury and one to carry, which you can find at corellianpublishing.com. And the Crystal Web is an energetic construct found all around the world. Hello to Brenda in the chat room. Good to see you, Brenda. There are even at least 2 access points in Antarctica, which have been put there by the rotating population over the years, because that's the number of witch schoolers we had in Antarctica who chose to create a crystal access point. But there are access points all over the world. The first one's in Chicago. The oldest one's here in Danville, but the first one's in Chicago, and thereby hangs a tale. And hello to my niece Lori in the chat room. Good to see you, Lori. When the Newcastle Society became involved with the Correllian tradition, and Correllians began working with the Crystal Web, which originates with Sir Ed Hubbard and the Newcastle Society, we tied into that some older buried crystals that existed in our system and turned them into access points. So they're definitely not the first access points, but in a manner of speaking, they're also the oldest. So you don't have to create your crystal access point from scratch if you have buried crystals as part of your practice. We did, and we tied some of those in. And hello to Melanie in the chat room. Hello to Mary Hawk in the chat room. Good to see you. And last night I did Tarot Thursday with Reverend Mary Hawk, which was a lot of fun. And you can see that at paganworld.tv. And we had fun reading for people. We always have fun when we do Tarot Thursday, and we do it once every month. We had planned to do it the Thursday before this, but we had a power outage here in Danville, so I wasn't able to. So I came on last night instead, and we had a blast, and we read for a number of people. And one of the interesting things that happens when Reverend Mary and I are both reading is that we tend often to draw the same or similar cards. We're very much in sync when we're doing this, which makes it very interesting and somewhat amusing. The other thing that happens is sometimes when I'm reading for a number of people, Mary says, Tarot Thursday is always fun, and we kept up our streak of pulling the same cards. Yes, we did. And I also find sometimes when I read for a number of people that no matter how well I shuffle the cards, they will keep popping out unexpectedly, the same cards. And that was happening last night also, because I always shuffle the cards thoroughly, but sometimes Spirit wants to hit the same theme. And it's not uncommon when you're doing readings at a psychic fair, for example, or on a show like Tarot Thursday, where you have a number of people come in, that they may have similar issues that they're dealing with because of whatever synchronicity. And therefore you will find that will be reflected in your readings. And you know, when that first happened to me 40 some years ago, when I was first doing psychic readings, I thought, oh, something's wrong here. But fortunately, my teacher, Lady Crystal, pointed out, no, sometimes because of synchronicity or just because Spirit wants it that way, people will come who have the same issues on the same day. It's almost like it's a certain wave of energy that draws them on that day. And you'll find yourself dealing with the same issue in different ways for different people. And I found that to be one of the more interesting aspects of card reading. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes you'll go a long time without seeing it. And then some days, it's just what happens. And usually when that happens, it's also a message for you. So if you find several people have come to you with the same issue, you should be paying attention yourself as well. And this is one of those things about psychic reading that you wouldn't think about if you hadn't had the experience. And when I teach on these subjects, psychic skills particularly, this is one of the things that I do try to include among the many details that come with professional reading that you wouldn't think of. And as you know, we are currently in the process of putting together psychicacademy.org, or psychicacademy.co, I beg your pardon. And this will be a school of the psychic arts. And as you know, I've taught the magical arts for many years, and I intend to continue teaching them. But I'm also going to be teaching more specifically the psychic arts. And I think that you will find that I have a number of things to say on this that you might not find elsewhere because of my many years in professional reading. And Melanie says, this happens to me during my own morning card pulls. I will pull the same card from the day before. I'll try again, and the same card comes out yet again. And I'm like, well, okay, LOL. And yes, exactly. And this is one of the ways that you know that this really works. You shuffle those cards up very thoroughly, the same card comes. Spirit wants you to have that message. There's no question. I mean, you could second guess yourself if you got a similar card, but when you get the exact same card several times on several days, obviously there's a specific message coming, and you know, yes, this is accurate. Yes, I'm doing this right, because you can't really explain it away with coincidence, even if you believe in coincidence. It's a little bit too much. And, you know, that's also like the synchronicity I was speaking of. You can second guess yourself, you can explain it away, but the truth is, it's a message from the universe. It's a synchronicity in the universe, and these things are aspects of our lives. And increasingly, science is coming around to see that some of these things are more verifiable than they once thought them to be. In baby steps, but we're seeing more and more of ideas we've taught all along now being seen by the scientific community seemingly for the first time. And I find that very interesting. And hello to Sir Ebony in the chat room. Good to see you, Sir Ebony. Always love to see Sir Ebony. Always love to see all of you. And we live in a very interesting time. Of course, you know, there's the famous Chinese curse, may you live in interesting times, but the truth is, all times are interesting times. Sometimes we forget that after the fact. And if our particular individual situation was very calm and prosperous, we may not realize how interesting the times are. But they're always interesting times. And no matter what's going on, it really is always the best of times and the worst of times for someone. And hello to Anna in the chat room. And Anna says, hello, Reverend Don, I've joined your Patreon and enjoyed the seminar. Thank you, Anna. I'm so glad to know that, and welcome. And I think you'll enjoy this next seminar as well. And then in October, well, first in August, my Patreon seminar will be Lessons from the Parliament, and it will be an exclusive look at my experiences at the Parliament of World's Religions in Chicago, which will have happened by that time. And we'll be talking about it in some detail. In October, I think the seminar is likely to be on the subject of seances, because that's always a popular October subject. And Sir Ebony says, what do you think might be the reason for such a gap between what we have discovered through our practices and magic and science? And I have an answer for that. There are a couple of answers for that. One is that we're all where we are. And, you know, it comes back to the diamond idea that the facet you're looking at looks a certain way. The facet next to it may look differently. But if you're only willing to look at one, you only see one. I think part of what happened with science and Christianity specifically is that Renaissance and Baroque, particularly Reformation Christianity, was so anti-science that they started out on a bad foot, science and spirituality. And for a long time, and even today, those two groups have a lot of trouble transcending their prejudices. And science has had a lot of prejudice against anything spiritual. But the other thing is, the farther we go, the better our ability to detect. And hello to Janet in the chat room. Good to see you, Janet. I think science is narrowing that gap with spirituality, not necessarily to say religion, in part because of the continuing sequential discoveries that they have made and understandings they have reached through things such as quantum theory, string theory, and the like, which has revealed that some of these things aren't as, quote, supernatural, end quote, as they've been perceived in the past. Now, the other thing that happened, I think, in addition to science and the Christian religion being at odds from the beginning, modern science, is that metaphysics also found itself at odds in much the same way. And I think if we can stop being all at odds and say, well, maybe this is another way to look at it, we'll find that we agree a lot more than we once did. But I think it's really the new discoveries and the increasing understanding that, well, for example, Newtonian physics was not, in fact, the be-all and end-all of physics. We know that now. Our understanding of time has drastically changed. Our understandings of the nature of reality have drastically changed. So the multiverse have drastically changed, even within the science, specifically within the scientific world, which is allowing us to come much closer together. But I also think that, in the metaphysical world, we Corellians were never anti-science. We always embraced the idea of science. We just figured that there were things that we saw that they didn't, and eventually they would too. And that's what we are in fact seeing. But a lot of it has been empire building on all, or empire guarding. Empire building too, but empire guarding on all fronts. No one wants to have to reassess their point of view, and some people are especially hesitant to do that. For a lot of people, they wrap their entire personality around that spiritual or scientific point of view. And so to reassess it is very, very hard for them. And this is a powerful political tactic that certain churches in particular very consciously engage in to build the personality around the religious teachings at an early age, so that the person can never easily depart from them, even if they see they're wrong, because it involves reconstructing the entire personality. I think that's a very successful but underhanded way of doing it. But it is a big part of why some people can't reassess their points of view. And this is also a problem in the pagan world. A lot of pagans, perhaps because they had that Christian upbringing, once they've rejected that and accepted a certain view of paganism, find it very hard to ever reassess that view, even when things are obviously changing. And part of it's just human nature. We like to think we're right, and we like to stick with what we know, and we don't always like to grow and change. But growth and change are the nature of this world. And I've always felt that we must understand that our understandings, too, are subject to growth and change, that they will evolve, they will develop, they will transform, no matter what we want, because development, growth, and transformation are the nature of life. I've always said that when I'm reincarnated, either born into a Corellian family or return to the Corellian tradition again, if I found it unchanged from what I left, I would be disappointed. My hope is that it would be expanded and grown and developed. And I am quite certain that our beloved Corellian ancestors are ensuring that at this time. mean, I've kind of made clear that things have not gone as I anticipated, um, have not gone as I had reason to expect, um, or as I would have thought they should in certain ways. But I think I see clearly where they're going and why it's good. And I think we're going toward a much more diversified future. But I also must acknowledge this is the nature of life. And, I've spoken of Lady Bitterwind in her teachings. Um, and one of Lady Bitterwind's principal teachings um, is that if you want to understand deity, if you want to understand spirit, look at nature, because it's the most unvarnished representation of deity. Why is this true? Because of the teaching as above, so below. The physical world reflects the spiritual world. And nature, having less conscious artifice than we, reflects it better than ourselves. And what do we see in nature? Constant growth, change, and diversification. The one thing nature never does is stay the same. And I think that, and in fact, I've written about my belief that this is the nature of perfection. A lot of people see perfection as reaching a certain plateau that you never depart from. I see that as stagnation, not perfection. Perfection is the dance of life. Perfection is the process of growth. It is movement, not stasis. And I think that cannot be emphasized too much. And I think it's very evident in the natural world. It's obvious not only in evolution, which is a constant ongoing process, and one that we can say that we've seen in our own lifetimes now, and also in society, and also, in every way. The way that nature adapts to its circumstances constantly changes with those circumstances. And the only constant that we see is change. And those religions which try to say that things have always been the same are ignoring an awful lot to indulge that fantasy. But it is a fantasy. This earth has changed constantly throughout its history. We know that. It's changed throughout our lifetime in minor ways, and in some cases, major ways. And it certainly will continue to. But, if we look at the history of the world, one of the things that really caught my attention as a child, I would watch Japanese monster movies, partly because at that time, if you wanted to watch something on television, there usually weren't that many choices, and the hours at which those would be run, they were the only choice I was interested in. But I remember a Gamera movie, and Gamera, was it Gamera? I believe it was Gamera, who was a prehistoric creature who had been trapped for millions of years, I think, or maybe it was what Gamera was fighting. It's been 50 some years we're talking about since I saw this movie. But they talked about how the earth was different when this creature lived. And that caught my attention, and studying science as opposed to Japanese monster movies, this is absolutely true. The atmosphere we breathe was not here millennia, well, eons ago. It is a result of the interplay between carbon producers and oxygen producers. There was a time when those were not both present on this planet, or they were present in different percentages. There was a time there was so much oxygen in the air that there were constant fires. And there was a time when there was far less of it. It keeps changing. And, by our standards, this is an infinitesimally slow change, but changes are constantly happening. And Serenity says, I always get nervous when talking about change and what needs it. And people respond with, it's always been this way. That's such a typical response, and perhaps it's that stagnation you speak of that I feel in those kinds of statements. And yes, absolutely. And hello to Jason in the chat room. Good to see you, nephew. Yeah, I mean, it's always been this way. It's a stopper statement. It's meant to stop discussion on the premise that something has always been a certain way, but nothing has always been a certain way. If you look at just our written history, it's very hard to support the idea that anything has been unchanging, other than change and itself, and the fact that humans come into conflict. Just to start with, our diet drastically changed with the coming of agriculture. And why did agriculture come? It certainly appears that we became an agricultural people because of the end of the ice ages, when the large prey animals that we had been living on ceased to be available, and we had to replace our major dietary source. And we replaced it with grain, which apparently we'd been experimenting with growing for a long time, but then had to rely on. But it became a very different diet to that of our ancestors before, and was born of necessity. How certain things we come back to, certain things we experience variations of. But if we could go back to that world and look at it through modern eyes, I don't know that we'd find much that's really the same. Mothers love their children for the most part. Fathers love their children for the most part. Children love their parents for the most part. That's probably the same. How they related to them may have changed a bit. How they related to them certainly has changed in the last few hundred years. And one of the big changes was the decrease in infant mortality. The United States heads the developed world in infant mortality, but it's still nothing compared to our ancestors. And that change in the likelihood of how long a newborn would live really did change how parents interacted with their children, particularly in that early phase, because there were things that people used to do that would blow people's mind today. And that has changed because of, in part, that change in infant mortality, also the prosperity that so many people have today that they did not have in the past. So, if you might first think that, well, parenthood has always been what it is, but it's had some substantial changes. Just look at how children dress today and in the last couple of hundred years versus any time previous. And that becomes very obvious. So I think that's our theme for today: change and development, and the fact that we always need it. With that, I see we've come to the end of our half hour. Once again, I'll recommend my Patreon at revdonlewis.com. We have the weekly chat room, the monthly newsletter, the monthly seminar, the monthly surprise, lots of things at revdonlewis.com. Also, I'll recommend CorellianPublishing.com, where you can get the new book by Lisa McSherry, who was our guest yesterday, Reverend Don's Book of Questions, Volume 1, 2, and 3, Corellian degree books, and many other things, books, videos, even some card decks, although some of our card decks have to come back into print. So thank you, everyone. I love you all. I love spending this time with you. And I wish you a wonderful weekend. I'll see you again on Monday. And let us close with our prayer. And Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for your presence in our lives now and at all times. And we ask you to help us to remain flexible and open to the changes which are constant in our world. And help us to understand that change and growth are part and parcel of life, and part and parcel of what we're here to take advantage of. That these are the teachers of the lessons of life, and are to be welcomed rather than feared. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love and with respect, and knowing you're always with us. Yet from respect, We bid you farewell, and may you be blessed now and always. And I thank you for joining me. I love you all. And for this weekend, I bid you farewell, and may you be blessed now and always. And I will see you